Hello and welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect Voice of the Analyst podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into successful digital transformation. This hybrid IT management strategies interview explores how jerry-rigged approaches to cloud adoption at many organizations have spawned complexity and spiraling and even unknown costs. We'll now hear from an IT industry analyst about what causes unwieldy cloud use, how new tools, processes, and methods are bringing insights and actionable analysis to regain control over hybrid IT sprawl. Here to help us explore new breeds of hybrid and multi-cloud management solutions is Rhett Dillingham, Vice President and Senior Analyst at More Insights and Strategy. Welcome, Rhett.
Thank you, Dana. Glad to be with you.
We're glad you're here. Rhett, what are some of the drivers that are making hybrid and multi-cloud adoption so complex?
Well, regardless of how an enterprise is invested in public and private cloud use for the last decade, a lot of them ended up in a similar situation where they have a footprint on at least one or multiple public clouds in addition to their private infrastructure, in whatever degree that private infrastructure has been cloud-enabled and turned into a cloud API available infrastructure to their developers. So they have this footprint across a hybrid infrastructure and multiple public clouds, and they need to decide how they're going to orchestrate on those various infrastructures and how they're going to manage in terms of control, cost, security, compliance, namely those areas, in operating cloud by cloud versus operating as a consolidated group of infrastructures that use common tooling. And this is the real wrestling point for a lot of them, regardless of how they got here.
Where are we in this as a sort of evolution? Are things going to get worse before they get better in terms of this level of complexity and heterogeneity?
I think we're at the point where this is so commonly recognized that we're well into the late majority of adopters of public cloud. So the vast majority of the market is in this situation. So we're not going to get worse from a market enterprise perspective. We're actually, I think, at the inflection point of the orchestration tooling, particularly with the advent of containers and container orchestration, getting more mature in a way that is ready for broad adoption and trust by enterprise in making bets on that technology and the platforms based on them. On the control side, we're still in the process of sorting the tooling. You have a number of vendors innovating in the space, and there have been a number of startup efforts there. Now we're seeing more of the historical infrastructure providers invest in the software capabilities and turning those into services, whether it's Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, VMware, Cisco. They're all making serious investment in this control aspect on a hybrid basis because the value is private but extends to public with the same need for control.
Now, you mentioned containers, and they provide somewhat of a common denominator approach that you can apply across different clouds with less arduous, specific work than would be without using containers. Does this mean, though, that the need and attractiveness of containers means that the private cloud people aren't going to help you deal with your public cloud issues, and the public cloud people aren't necessarily going to help you deal with either other public clouds or private cloud? Is that the reason we're at where we are too?
If you go back to the fundamental basis of adoption of cloud and the value proposition, it was first and foremost about agility, more so than cost efficiency. And containers are a way of extending that value, getting much deeper into that speed of development and innovation and experimentation, time to market. So it is an improvement. It is not geared around that agility value that furthers cloud a stark difference from VMs in the sense of how the vendors support it and view it. So I think a different angle on that would be use of VMs in public cloud was step one. Containers is a significant step two in improved cloud native development for that agility and speed value. The value the vendor ecosystem is bringing with the platforms and how that works in a portable way across hybrid infrastructures and multi-cloud is more easily delivered with containers. So I think there's going to be an enterprise world where there is orchestration run specific to cloud infrastructure, public versus private, different on various public clouds. And there's going to be more commonality with containers by virtue of essentially the Kubernetes project and the CNCF portfolio. That's going to deliver for new applications and those lifted and shifted into containers, much more seamless use across these infrastructures, if not immediately in orchestration, at least from the control perspective.
All right. Certainly, we seem to be at a point where the number of cloud options has outstripped the ability to manage them. So, in a sense, the cart is in front of the horse being management. But as you say, we're starting to now see change and management coming to the fore. What is this going to mean in terms of previous approaches to management? So, a lot of organizations have had management for heterogeneity issues, whether it was on an applications level, data level, even on an operating system and platform level. Should we think about the new form of management for cloud having a relationship to the old management for legacy?
That is a big question for enterprise and how much they extend their existing tool set to public cloud. A lot of the vendors from the private side are invested in delivering that capability. That hasn't been where many started. I think the rush to adoption of public cloud and the focus on agility over cost efficiency has driven a dominance of the culture of we're going to provide visibility and report and guide, but we're not going to control because of the business value of that agility. And the tools have grown up as a delivery on that visibility versus the control of the typical enterprise private infrastructure approach, which is set up for a disruptive orientation to the software and not a continuity, which has advantaged the vendors in those different spheres. I see that continuing.
Now, you mentioned both agility and cost as motivators for going to cloud in a variety of permutations. But do you get to the point where if the complexity and the heterogeneity and the lack of insight and control gets to a point where you're not anymore increasing your agility, or at least not across a development to operations flow, and you're probably not getting your best costs either? So are we at a point, too, where the complexity is subverting our desire for agility and for at least predictable and maintainable total costs?
I think we're still a long way from maturity in effective use of cloud infrastructure. We're still at a point where just understanding what is optimal is pretty difficult in the various purchase consumption options of public cloud by provider, and comparing that to an accurate cost model for private infrastructure. So the tooling needs to be in place to support this. A lot of discussion this week about OneSphere from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where they have invested in delivering some of this comparability and are innovating in analytics to enable decision making. I see a lot of innovation to be had in that space, and that's just the tooling. There's also the management of the services, where the cloud managed service provider market is continuing to develop in less of a broker orientation and more of a value in optimizing an enterprise's footprint across the various infrastructures that they've opted into on the basis of what's optimal for that agility value and the services that are differentiating about that infrastructure, in AWS versus Azure and Google and so forth, different from the cost comparison.
Given that it's important for us to show productivity ongoing, is there a way for these vendors that are now coming to the fore with monitoring and tools for insight? It seems to me this wave is different in that they can take that very rapidly and move towards analytics, maybe even predictive, maybe even automation of how workloads and data would be potentially fungibly moved across different clouds based on the right performance metrics and or cost metrics. Is that part of the attractiveness of coming to a cross-cloud capability for management, that it would be a slippery slope towards some pretty impressive analytics and or performance-oriented automation?
Yeah, so we've had investment in the tooling from the cloud providers, the software providers, as well as the infrastructure providers, and the insights have come more from the professional services realm than they have from the tooling realm. And that's provided a feedback loop that can now be applied across hybrid and multi-cloud in a way that hasn't come from the public cloud provider tools themselves. So where I see the most innovation is in the providers that are trying to address a multi-cloud environment and feed that from their customer engagements, best from professional services. I like the opportunity Hewlett-Packard Enterprise has to benefit from their acquisitions of cloud technology partners and RedPixie and feeding those insights in. A lot of examples given this week about the work they're doing in OneSphere and moving those insights into action for customers through analytics.
Yeah, I was also thinking a little bit about the Nimble acquisition in InfoSight and some opportunity for that intellectual property to come to bear on this too.
Yes, which is really harvesting the value of the control and insights of the private infrastructure and the software-defined orientation to private infrastructure in comparison to the public cloud options.
Well, tell us a little bit about Rhett Dillingham. You haven't been an IT industry analyst forever. Tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. Longtime product management leader. Started in hardware, AMD, and moved into software. This is before the cloud days of Microsoft, and then was building out the early capabilities of AWS and EC2, EBS block storage, and then went into portfolio of services at Rackspace, and building those out at the platform level and the overall Rackspace public cloud. And as the value of OpenStack matured into private use, worked with a number of enterprises on private OpenStack cloud deployments. As an analyst, I skew product management oriented and consultative and go-to-market positioning work with clients.
All right, well, let's dwell on that product management side for a bit. Given that we're still immature in the market, given what you know that the end customers are going to look for an end state, what should vendors like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise be doing in order to put together the right set of function, process, and simplicity, and ultimately analytics and automation to start to really solve this mess among cloud adoption patterns and sprawl?
Automation and orchestration. We talked about control of cost, security, and compliance. I think there's a tooling and services spectrum to be delivered on those. The third element that needs to be brought into the word process is the control structure of each enterprise, what their strategy is across the different infrastructures. Where are they optimizing on cost based on what they can do in private infrastructure? Where are they setting up decision processes for what incremental services should be adopted, what incremental clouds should be adopted, as an Oracle and an IBM are positioning their cloud offers for adoption beyond what's been adopted already by a client in AWS, Google, Azure. I think there's a synergy to be had across those three that spans from the software and services tooling into the services and managed services in some cases when the enterprise is looking for an operational partner.
One of the things that I struggle with, Rhett, is not just the process, the technology, and the opportunity, but the people. Who in a typical enterprise IT organization should be tasked with the oversight management? Because it is more than just IT. To me, it's economics, it's procurement, it's contracts. It involves a bit more than red light, green light on speed. Tell me a little bit about who or how organizations need to change to get the right people in charge of these new tools as they come out.
More so than individuals, I think this is about the recognition of the need for partnership between the business units and development organizations and the operational IT organizational arm of the enterprise. The focus on agility for business value had a lot of the cloud adoption led by the business units and the application development organizations. As the focus on maturity mixes in the control of cost, security, compliance, those are traditional realms of the IT operational organization. And the need for decision structure around sourcing, where they value incremental capabilities from clouds and more cloud providers is a decision of trade-off in complexity, as you were mentioning, versus incremental value of that additional provider and an incremental service and portability across those. So what I'm seeing in the most mature setups is the partnership across those orientations of those organizations, as well as the acknowledgement and reconciliation of those trade-offs in long-term portability of applications across infrastructure and the value of adoption of proprietary capability deeper cognitive machine learning automation, IoT capability, some of the drivers of the more specific public cloud platform use.
So with a lot of aspects of adopting cloud, you need to think about the organizational implications and really refactor how your business operates. This is not just bolting on a cloud capability. You have to really rethink how you're doing business almost across the board in order to take full advantage of that. Is that something you see too?
I do. I think there's wide recognition of that theme, and it gets into the nuts and bolts as you adopt a platform and you determine exactly how the operations function and role is going to be defined and who's going to handle it, how much you're going to empower the developers to do themselves, with the accountability that results, trade-off there for them and their role. But it's almost over-rotation and focus to that out of recognition of it and lack of valuation of that more senior level decision making in what the cloud strategy is. I hear a lot of cloud strategies that are as simple as, yes, we're allowing and empowering adoption of cloud by our development teams without the second level recognition of the need to have a strategy for what the guidelines are for that adoption. Not in the sense of just controlling cost, but in the sense of how do you view the value of long-term portability? How do you value strategic sourcing and ability to negotiate across these providers long-term with evidence and demonstrable portability of your application portfolio?
Yep. And in order to make those proper calls on where you want to go with cloud and to what degree across which provider, organizations like HPE are coming up with new tools. So we've heard about OneSphere. We're now seeing something called GreenLake Hybrid Cloud, which is a use of OneSphere as a service. Is that the way to go? That we should think of cloud management, oversight, and optimization as a set of services rather than a product or a tool? It seems to me that a set of services with even an ecosystem behind them is pretty powerful conceptually.
Sure. I think there's three layers to that. One is the tool, whether that is consumed as software or as a service. Second is the professional consultative services around that, to the degree that you, as an enterprise, need help getting up to speed in how your organization needs to adjust to benefit from the tools and the capabilities the tools are wrangling. And then third is a decision on whether you need an operational partner from a managed service provider perspective, and that's where HPE is stepping up and saying, we will handle all three of these. We will deliver your tools in various consumption models on through to a SaaS delivery model, for example, with OneSphere, and we will operate the services for you beyond that SaaS control portal into your infrastructure management across a hybrid footprint with the GreenLake hybrid cloud offering. I think it's very compelling.
Great. Now, to sort of wrap things up, it seems to me that we're at a point where we need certain things to converge in the future, which is always a tricky business. So to use the analogy of a hockey puck, it seems that the skater is the vendor trying to provide these good services. The hockey puck is the end-user organization that's got problems, and then the ice is this wide-open market. We'd like to have them all come together at some point in the future. We've talked about the vendors. We understand the market pretty well. But what should the end-user organizations be starting to do and think in order for them to be prepared to start to take advantage of these tools? What should be happening inside your development, your DevOps, and that larger overview of process and organization in order to say, okay, we're going to take advantage of that hockey player when they're ready so that we can really come together and be proficient as a cloud-first organization?
Well, I think you need to have a plan in place on each element we've talked about. There needs to be a plan in place for how you are maturing your tool set in cloud-native development, how you are supporting that on the development side, in the development flow from a CI/CD perspective, how you're reconciling that with the operational tool set and the culture of operating in a DevOps model with whatever degree of iterative development you want to enable. So there's the tooling in place from an orchestration and development capability and operations perspective, which can be containers or not, gets into container orchestration and the cloud management platforms. There is the control aspect, what tooling you're going to apply there, how you're going to consume that, and how much you want it provided as a consultative offer, and then how much you want those options managed for you by an operational partner, and then how you're going to set up your decision-making structure internally. I think every element of that is where you need to be maturing your capability. A lot of the starting baseline consultative value of a professional services partner is walking you through the decision-making that is common to every organization on each of those fronts and enabling a deep discussion of where you want to be in 3, 5, 10 years and deciding proactively, more importantly than anything, what is the goal? I think there's a lot of oversimplification of what the goal is, which is adoption of cloud and a picking of best of breed of tools without a vision for where do you want the organization to be and how much it benefits from this agility and speed value and the cost efficiency opportunity.
I think it's clear that those organizations that can take that holistic view to have the long-term picture in mind and then actually execute on it would have a significant advantage in whatever market they're in for those that are laggards in this. Is that fair?
It is. And one thing that I think we tend to gloss over but does exist is a dynamic where some of the decision makers in enterprise are not necessarily incented to think and consider these options on a long-term basis. The folks who are in role, often for 1 to 3 years before moving to a different role or a different enterprise, are going to consider these options differently than someone who's been in role for 5, 10 years and intends to be there through this cycle and outcome. I see those decisions made differently, and I think sometimes the executives watching this transpire are missing that dynamic and allowing some decisions to be made that are more short-term oriented than long-term.
Maybe people on the board of directors should familiarize themselves more with cloud management capabilities as we go forward. All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. We've been exploring how jerry-rigged approaches to cloud adoption at many organizations has spawned complexity and spiraling costs. And we've also learned about new breeds of hybrid and multi-cloud management solutions that are bringing insights and even actionable analysis to help regain control over hybrid IT sprawl. So please join me in thanking our guest. We've been here with Rhett Dillingham, Vice President and Senior Analyst at More Insights and Strategy. Thank you so much, Rhett.
It's a pleasure, Dana.
And a big thank you to our audience as well for joining us for this BriefingsDirect Voice of the Analyst Hybrid IT Management Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host on this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT community and do come back next time.